Ryan Lawrence, PhillyVoice.com, as the Phillies continue on Friday against the New York Metropolitans, Ryan. But, hey, 42-48, I guess much better than the 29-win output they gave us at the All-Star break last year. So, Ryan, what has been the biggest surprise about this team?
I mean, it might just be the fact that they've had a lot more success than anybody would have guessed. I mean, I think that if you went back and looked at any of the preseason prognosticators and where all the quote-unquote experts had the Phillies, finishing this year, almost everybody had them as the same team as last year, losing 100 games. I think a lot of people had them as the worst team in baseball. I didn't see that. I mean, I thought they would be one of the, say, bottom six. But, I thought that Atlanta, Cincinnati, one of the teams in the NL West, whether it was San Diego or Colorado, or, I thought that there would be plenty of teams in contention for that title. I didn't think the Phillies were far and away the worst team. And, they've proven that. They've, obviously, the young pitching stitched pretty well. I think Aaron Nola kind of typifies what you're going to get with young pitching, where they're very talented, and he went through a stretch for 2 months where he's one of the best pitchers in baseball, or at least the best in the National League. And then, he dealt with some growing pains at the end there. But, yeah, I would just say overall, young pitching has kept them in games. And, they haven't scored a ton of runs, but, their offense scored when it mattered. And they certainly came alive in the last 2 weeks.
What are some of the main storylines now post-All-Star break that Philly fans who, I mean, let's be honest, this isn't going to be a team that's going to be battling for a wild card spot, right? So to keep an eye on through the second half of this year.
Well, I will say this. I mean, in kind of getting back, and I don't mean to kind of to take everything I said and throw it away, but, I wouldn't be surprised if this team goes through a struggling period again, just because, they don't have the talent. They have more young talent than they did last year, without a doubt. But, just because they're only 6 games above 500 now, I'm not sure that's where they finish. I think they'll probably still lose between 90, 95 games. So I think they will go through their struggles. But, I would think the major storylines to keep an eye on in the next 2.5 months, one is the trade deadline. I mean, they are still going to make moves. They don't have a Hamels or a Papelbon. They don't have big names to move. But, I think they should be able to get a useful prospect for Hellickson. I think maybe some of the relief pitchers they could move, Mark Gomez being probably the most obvious. And then after that is, all eyes will be on the J.P. Crawfords and the Jake Thompsons and, the rest of the prospects, Nick Williams, and when they're going to get here, because I think they will get here before the end of the year, even if it's, for a cup of coffee in the big leagues, just so next year they have that experience to build on. But, yeah, I mean, obvious. There's going to be a lot of clamoring for if J.P. Crawford continues to hit like he did in the last few weeks in AAA. I think that the drum's going to start to sound from the fans, and just as it had in years past with Nola and with Ken Giles before him. So I think that'll kind of be where everybody's eyes are going to be on.
Ryan, this team has overachieved, like you said, and they're only 6-7 games away from a wild card spot. I mean, what's to say this team doesn't continue to surprise in the second half of the season? And do they become buyers instead of sellers?
Yeah, I really don't think so. I mean, to their credit, they have played very well, especially in the last couple weeks. And before that, though, there was a month where they were just dreadful, where they were scoring basically 2 runs a game, and where their starting pitching had kind of fallen off too. So I think they just have to be honest with themselves. They have to realize that they don't necessarily have all the pieces. Even if they were buyers all of a sudden, you're not going to make 2 or 3 trades and be a serious contender. The reality is that there's too many holes in the lineup. I think that some of these guys that have been hot for 3 weeks probably going to come back down to earth, because you look at the back of the baseball cards, that's kind of who they are. I think that guys like Franco continue to take positive steps. I mean, he's certainly come alive in the last 2 weeks, and he has the talent to be a difference maker in the middle lineup, but he's just one guy. Odubel Herrera is just a second guy. Beyond that, I'm not sure you can look at that lineup and say for sure, these are guys that are definitely going to be here for a year from now and be pieces in that lineup. So I just think they have to be honest with themselves. I don't think, and if you're honest with who they are, it's hard to sit here and say they're even, the third best team in the division. So, yeah, you can talk about wild card all you want, but if you're going to get in the wild card, you got to be better than the Mets or the Nationals, whoever's not in first, and you got to be better than the Marlins. And I just don't see them, being a year from now. We can talk about that.
And the only reason
I don't think right now.
And the only reason I said that, because we all know that baseball is a game of streaks. Obviously, some teams get into funks and streak, have bad streaks. But if they can get away from that, I mean, I'm just put it out there that it's not too far fetched to think that this team is a bunch of overachievers. They've got great young pitching.
Bill, you are the ultimate optimist.
I am the ultimate optimist, and what's to say they?
I love it.
And Mike,
I love your optimism.
You would agree that a game is a baseball of streaks.
I think they had a good streak.
I would say that it's not a game of streaks; it's a marathon. It's a 160-game season.
Well,
so
I know,
you
but
can talk about going on streaks, but you're going to have your good streaks and your bad streaks. But the reality is, when you have a young team like they do, with the pitching that they do, I don't think you can expect those guys for the next 2.5 months to pitch at that level. They're all going to go through these. We just see what Nola went through. It wouldn't shock me if Eichhoff goes through that, in the second half at some time. It wouldn't shock me if Eflin goes through that, if Velasquez goes through that. So these guys aren't the Hamels and the Hallidays where you just plug them out there and you know what you're going to get. They're young guys. They're going to struggle. It's just a part of the process. I mean, I'm not saying that they can't, prove all us doubters wrong, however you want to word it. But I just think the reality is, you look up and down that 25-man roster, there really isn't any guy you can point your finger at and say, I definitely know what I'm going to get that guy for 2.5 months. When you have young players.
The big thing, Rye, too, is they're 19-9 in one-run games. I mean, I think that has padded their record here.
Right.
And they're 5-6 in their last 11 one-run games. You flip a coin a lot of times. Exactly. Right, and you could project that out over a full season. Even if that gap closes a little bit, they're on pace for 76 wins, which is a lot more than a lot. But those one-run wins that put them in position here. I guess one of the things I'm looking at moving forward here, Rye, is Herrera's in the All-Star game last night. I want to get your opinion on, do they view him as the center fielder of the future? Do they buy him for the last 2 years? I mean, he was an All-Star this year, and everybody has to have an All-Star, but do they buy him as their guy for the next 2 years?
Yeah, I'm not sure if he was an All-Star. Everybody needs to have an All-Star. I mean, he's had a pretty good year. He's hitting 300. His on-base percentage, I think, it was right around 390. Already has more home runs than he had last year. Already has more walks than he had last year. So he's developing as a hitter in a positive way. And to answer your question, I would just say that he is their center fielder of the future until somebody else proves otherwise. So I think that, again, a year and a half from now, if you said Odubel Herrera in the All-Star game, everybody would be completely thrilled that a Rule 5 guy worked out as well as that. So I think that you have to be very encouraged with, where he is as a major leaguer. I think he's only, I'd be guessing right now, but I think he's 24, 25 years old. I should know that. But, I mean, he's not like a flash-in-the-pan type guy. He's a young hitter that's only getting better. Defensively, he's still a little bit of a work in progress. He's not as good as he was last year, but we also have to remember it's only a position he's only been playing for a year and a half. Really the guys that at the top of the minor league, you would talk about center fielders, would be Roman Quinn, and he's really had trouble staying on the field every single year. He's on the DL again now. A guy with a lot of talent and a pure natural center fielder. Also a guy that switched positions back and forth, but was a center fielder in high school, so it's not that foreign to him. But he can't stay on the field, and he's not going to get to the major leagues if he can't develop in the minor leagues. And really after that, I can't. It'd be hard for me to pick out a guy and say that this guy is the center fielder of the future. So Odubel Herrera is the guy until someone else proves otherwise.
Ryan Lawrence is with us, PhillyVoice.com, to get all his Phillies news. And, of course, I got to, looking at a couple storylines for the end of the year.
I'm sorry to cut you off real quick, but Mickey Moniak is obviously a center fielder, but he just got drafted and was 17 2 months ago. So, I didn't want to completely forget about Mickey Moniak, but he's very young.
And I don't know that people think, 4 or 5 years possibly for a guy like that. Let me get your opinion on just a couple of things real fast. Rupp, is he a long-term guy, or is he just, kind of your classic stopgap? Because, he's hit number 5 in the lineup. He's swinging a nice bat. Do they view him as a guy, more of a long-term guy, or do they just kind of look at him as a stopgap?
Maybe he's the guy you look into the trade market could bring, because if you're really sold on Jorge Alfaro, which, I think Jorge Alfaro was the lead guy in that package they got back for Hamels. I'm a big Jorge Alfaro fan. I think that he's got the power and the arm behind the plate that are just kind of all-star type caliber tools. To me, as good as Cameron Rupp's played, and all credit to Cameron Rupp, he wants to show that he's the catcher of the future, and he doesn't want to hear about Andrew Knapp or Jorge Alfaro. But I think maybe you see if you can get it, if you put his name out there, and if someone wants to give you something good back, then you got to think about it with Rupp. Because I really do think that that they have some depth in catching in the minor leagues, and you always have to evaluate what guys' values are, not only to you but to other teams. So if the evaluation is that Rupp can bring more back in a trade than he's worth to you in the next year and a half, you got to think about that. But more credit to him; he's played really well.
Yeah, he really has. Phillies are 42-48. They're on a 76-win pace. Vegas had them at 64.5. So we'll get. They got a 76-win pace. Rye, they going to get there?
76 wins? I don't think so, because I think that would be, right around, 5 games under 500? I'm not seeing that. I mean, look, I don't mean to be Debbie Downer here, but I think the reality is they've played really well. But, the baseball season is a 160-game marathon, and I think they just have too many young, unproven guys that, I think they're going to have another bad turn here. And I'm sorry to say that, but I think that some of those young pitchers are going to come back down to earth a little bit. Not that they're not going to be good this time next year, but I just think that what we saw happen to Nola wouldn't be surprised me if two more of their pitchers kind of go through spells like that, just because they're young guys that are learning the league for the first time. So I, still think that they're probably a team that's going to lose 90 to 94 games.
That would be a bad second half of the season, a long second half. Ryan Lawrence, PhillyVoice.com, vacationing down the Jersey Shore, kind enough to spend a couple of moments with us here as the Phillies open up the second half of the season Friday against the Mets. Thanks, Rye.
No problem, Mike. Have a good one.